everybody, it's been over 3 years since we last checked out Jake's farm, Cedar Springs Farm. He's going to show us today an amazing tour of his farm, everything that's grown. We're going to look in depth at his cattle, his silvopasture farm, his geese, everything working together to create this abundant farm ecosystem. This is our second video we're making here.
Yeah.
You know, the first video, we titled it Farmer Coming from a Desert, and I think people don't understand really the concept of a desert. You know, like the neighbor's farm where it's sagebrush, we're gonna show that is, what this farm used to look like. There was not much grass here.
And it's just all about management. That's the only difference, is how do you manage your landscape? And when you go walk just up my driveway and cross over the fence to my neighbor's place, it's sagebrush, it's some juniper pinyon, and it hasn't been grazed either. When you see some of the properties around here that have gone totally fallow, it's degrading. Some people think, oh, leave nature alone, it's perfect. But the thing is, nature needs management, and if it's not the wild herds of bison that used to live here, then we have to step in and manage. And because there's nothing managing that piece of land next door, it's gone into degradation. You can tell the soil, it's really dry, it's blowing away a little more every year. This is just sagebrush, not producing any calories for humans or animals. It's just kind of sitting there. Whereas we introduce management, and all we're doing with management with this style is we're mimicking how nature would manage if left to its own procedures. Beavers would be working within the drainages, stopping the water flow so that it can buffer the water table. So anywhere we have moving water, we're stopping it and slowing it down and spreading it out. Just soak that water into your whole landscape. And that's where we use these swales and these contours. So that's us being the beaver. And then we use cattle for the bison. Bison managed this landscape for as far back as we know. They were the disturbance regime, but they were also fertilizing. They were leaving behind them fertility. The grasses would all be crushed down. And then it would come back, everything could come back better every time. And we're just mimicking that technique, rotating the cattle through the system. And the nice thing is we're being the beaver and the bison at the same time. The earthworks and the water management is raising our water table, allowing for the desert to essentially transform into a grasslands. And when we started to, be the beaver and hold that water back and spread it out on contour across the farm, the water table came up. And I think that the water table came up and actually infringed upon the root systems of those juniper trees, which are dryland trees. And so the junipers that we have in those areas are actually slowly dying off and making way for more of a deciduous ecosystem. So where those junipers are dying off, we're coming in and replanting those zones with honey locust and oak and hazelnut, apple, mulberry. Sky's the limit. The long-term goal is eventually to be input free for hog feed and let the cattle forage it, poultry, of course us too. Now with how much grass and all these trees, the deer actually come and hang out all winter now. We have tons of these spotted leopard frogs, which are considered endangered. We're basically a different ecosystem than we started with. And we haven't pushed the other ecosystem out. The dryland ecosystem is also important. We're letting that ecosystem thrive in different areas of the farm in harmony with these areas that we're now, spreading water out and planting deciduous trees on. Tell you a little bit about our dairy operation. Of course, it's dead summer, tall grass, lots of flies, so we're all doing our best to survive the fly season. But we keep our dairy operation really simple. We don't sell milk at this point. I used to run an actual dairy farm and got pretty tired of it. So what we do now is we milk for family and friends, and it's a really simple concept. We leave the calves with their mamas. We don't pull the babies off the dairy cows. And so these cows get to raise their babies on pasture for 6 months. And during that time, what we do is if we want to milk, we bring the mamas into a corral for the night with, a water tub and a nice bale of hay and a salt lick. And they spend the night in that hotel room, and it's like real nice for them, kind of spoil them in there. In the morning, they haven't seen their calf for, 10 or 12 hours, so they've actually built up a good amount of milk. Then we milk, filter it, put it in cans in the fridge to skim later to make butter out of. And as soon as we're done milking, we kick the mamas back out with their babies for the day. And what's nice about that method is we get to milk when we want to. If we're having a rough day, or we had a late night, or if we just don't feel like milking the cows that day, there's no pressure. All we do is let the calves drink all the milk. If I say, you know what, this month I'm gonna really try to make a lot of butter, then I do a lot of milking. I put them away every night and milk every morning, and it takes me about 4 days of milking to save up enough cream for a batch of butter.
How much butter does that make?
Say like 5 pounds of butter every 4 days off of hand milking 2 cows. And that's also with calf sharing. And of course we love these jerseys. These are New Zealand genetics. They're not commercial American jerseys. They do awesome on pasture, and they're designed to basically just eat a lot of grass and be really efficient. And they've also got exceptional cream content. Mabel here makes at least 30% cream, and when she's in later lactation, that number just goes up. And this is Mabel. She's my old girl. I've had her since she was a baby. I guess Mabel's about 12 years old.
Isn't she internet famous?
Yeah, Mabel's pretty famous. She has kind of her own following because she's just such a good cow. I mean, how many cows can you walk up to in a field, sit down next to them and just start milking them, and they don't move, they don't throw a kick? She's just a sweet, big teddy bear of a cow. And I have all of her daughters here too. Leave for 20 minutes, they knock over their water tank, and they push the fence over. It's like job security for me, I guess. But
So these Jersey cows here, are they milkers? Or...
some of them. This is like a Jersey cow, but she's more of a nurse cow.
Oh, okay.
All the red ones are Devons. Devons are just, to me, a high quality beef cattle, like a heritage beef cattle. And then we've got some Belty cross cattle. So I used to raise primarily Belty beef cattle. Hey, give it a minute to fill. Give it a minute to fill. With how expensive it was to feed them through the winter here, I couldn't justify having a cow-calf operation and raising feeders together. So I had to pick one, and I picked raising feeders. So this is one of the areas of the farm that we still haven't gotten a lot of water on yet. We're getting higher up and closer to the mesa, and so the knapweed is still really predominant here. What's really cool about this area is that we kind of mob grazing it, and what it does is it crushes all the knapweed down. I try to graze it before it flowers, and then it's still palatable to the cattle. They come through, they knock it all down, they eat a bunch of it, and what happens is it's weakening the knapweed to the point where now we have this pest that is actually helping us too. The knapweed seed heads don't normally look like this. This is diseased. And so by weakening the knapweed through rotational grazing, this is full of, they're like little worms almost. I don't know if you can see them moving around, but what these little worms are doing is they're eating all the seeds. And so, in a way, by rotational grazing the knapweed heavily, we've almost convinced it to seek harmony with the rest of the plants. And what that looks like for it is it has to have a natural predator, which up until now it hasn't. At this point, almost every single knapweed plant is diseased. And it's going into recession, and what that's allowing for is grasses and clovers and alfalfas to actually start making a way in this zone. Whereas before, it was 100% knapweed. Through rotational grazing, we weakened it, it's under attack, and now the grasses and legumes can come up around it.
Wow, that's awesome. That's the way to do it, versus spraying some glyphosate or some nasty chemical.
Well, spraying chemicals is a very temporary solution. It's gonna destroy your soil biology and just allow for more weeds to come in. Whereas this holistic approach of rotational grazing, it's amending the whole system in a positive way. Phase 2 is add water. So I've dragged a whole bunch of gated pipe out here, and what I'm gonna start doing in the next week or two, after I finish doctoring up all these pipes, is gently flooding water over the knapweed. So the allelopathogen that knapweed produces in its roots, which kills off the other plants around it, it's water soluble. So as long as there's water soaking down through the soil, that toxin is going to actually leave the soil. It's going to clean. And once that toxin has been at least somewhat removed from the soil, then the grasses and legumes can really come in. It's going to create a balance. Again, there's always going to be knapweed out here. Come to peace with that. We're not going to spray it and try to get rid of it because it will just be back in a few years. We'll see how this works. I mean, we'll check back again in a year or two and see if this actually works or not. This is our flock of geese. They're domestic geese, but we treat them like wild. They 100% forage their diet, and they actually are really beneficial for our ponds. Like, not only do they eat mosquito larvae and actually eat algae as well, but they kind of aerate too. They spend a lot of time in there splashing around, kicking around, diving, eating pond plants off the bottom. You know, we see a lot of action on the ponds from geese. And they're also harvesting a lot of nutrients out of the ponds. You know, we have a lot of flow, a lot of ditch water that can flow through our ponds, and with that flow come crawdads, fish, all kinds of just particulates, stuff that might have caloric value that would just wash through the farm. And they're kind of almost like a net. They post up in the pond right where the water's coming in, and they're just foraging. They're just eating everything washing down the stream. They're hitting all the ponds every day, making their rounds, and then they like to go visit the pigs. And pigs kind of make a mess when they eat. They spread some food out, and the geese like to go clean up after the pigs too.
Wow. And you started with one, right?
Yeah, we started with one goose, somewhat of a mystical goose who appeared here on her own. We really liked her. She's a Toulouse, is the variety she is, and really liked her temperament, really liked that she just was self-sufficient. And so I found somebody getting rid of a bunch of Toulouse geese. Now the one that has been here for years on her own, now she has a whole bunch of friends and a whole flock to integrate into, and I'm actually really happy with them. What I like about the Toulouse geese is they're not aggressive.
Have you ever eaten one?
Nope. I figure they're worth more alive than dead. You kill a goose in a system like this, it's you're removing an integral part of the system in a way. We got plenty of beef and pork in the freezer. I'm not hurting to go pluck a goose out here. Don't get me wrong, if we had to, it's kind of like passively creating protein. I'd rather than be reproducing and foraging.
That's awesome. You know, you're almost treating them as a restoration tool than anything else. You know?
Exactly. I mean, meat would be a byproduct if we needed it, but the services they offer are pretty valuable. And as long as we have other meat sources, I'd rather keep them alive.
So we were here about 3 years ago, and none of these trees were over 3 feet tall.
In the past few years, these trees really exploded. Been able to, you know, use the swale that they're planted along to convey some water to them. And this is the first year we're actually getting a crop of plums. These are Japanese plums. I don't know how good they're gonna taste because I've never had one. What's really awesome about these trees is they put out these big root systems by now. They've put on, that thing's probably topping out at almost 20 feet tall. You know, maybe the Japanese plums will be great. Maybe we'll like them. Maybe we'll feed them all to the pigs.
What about your pigs?
The pigs are definitely for me. So this is a training pen. We start them off in here. It's hard fenced. It has water running through it that they can drink out of and wallow in. And they have a free feeder. It's like a nuclear bomb went off in here because it's the training pen. It's a sacrificial zone. But the benefit is while they're in here, we get them friendly, we get them tuned up on our program, get them a little bigger, and then start pasturing them out in those trees with portable electric fencing. We've found that pigs in the high desert, you have to manage them properly, or else everything looks like this. That's why this is the sacrificial training pen, because I don't want the whole farm to look like this. So while they're in here, we try to get them to gain weight, we get them friendly, and when they go out on pasture, we're gonna wring their noses, which keeps them from rooting. In the high desert, if they root up an area, you can be looking at 10 years before you see recovery. And so for us, that's not regenerative. We're not looking to degrade land. In the process of creating meat, we're looking to regenerate land, and meat is the byproduct.
How many pigs are you at this year?
This year we're raising 30. I used to raise feeders and breeding stock. We kept sows, a boar, the whole thing. I have a good friend in Paonia over at Down Home Farm. We struck a deal where all of our breeding stock went to him and all of their feeders come to us. So now we're kind of splitting the load. They used to do breeding stock and farrowing and feeders as well. And so we're both doing everything. And at some point we sat down and talked about it. And so now we have struck somewhat of a partnership where all of our breeding stock has gone to them and we're raising feeders for them as well. So we're raising 30 this year. Half of them are going back to Down Home at the end of the season. Standing here next to like a 20-foot tall honey locust tree that I planted when it was a stick. I just love that feeling. Who could have thought? Here we are in the high desert and it's like actually working. This is a template. This is an example of just how we can work within almost any ecosystem with proper water management, integrating agroforestry, integrating livestock. Those are the three big things. But it's really rare in my experience to find people who integrate all three into one system. And that's what I like about working with RAD, with Restoration Agriculture Development, Mark Shepard's company, and learning from them. We really utilize all three of those and integrate them together. It's all there, and it all plays off of each other, and it creates a whole system, which will outlive us. This is a high tunnel. We put up the high tunnel a few years ago. One of the things about this environment is the weather can be unpredictable. We can get late frosts, early frosts. We can get a lot of different kind of variables in the high desert for growing. So for example, if we want to grow things like peppers, what we found is growing them in this hoop house, it's how we get a big pepper crop. When we used to grow them in the garden, unprotected, we'd get some peppers here and there, and some years we wouldn't get any. In here, we have a great pepper crop every year. Same with tomatoes. We'd always get a good crop of tomatoes in the garden, but in here, we get like a bumper crop every year. The tomato plants get huge, they get loaded, and something too about the filtered light, the way that the plastic filters the UV, everything in here just seems to do really well. We feel it's really important to provide for our family what our needs are in our own garden. Just like we raise our own beef, we raise our own pork, we're planting fruit trees and nut trees. It's also really important to designate a certain amount of our efforts every year into growing the annual crops that give us the calories we need. For example, cabbage is a big one for us. My wife Megan makes a lot of sauerkraut, and it stores all winter. So all winter we'll eat pork chops with a big heaping load of sauerkraut on top, and that gives us what we need from the garden all winter long. Same with tomatoes. We grow mostly canners, can them and freeze them and use them all winter for tomato sauce, soup, you name it. I grow some corn in here. The corn I'm growing this year is a blue corn from seed I brought back from a trip. I went to Oaxaca. I met this old farmer named Raphael. He was a really cool guy. I met him on a street corner. He's grown blue corn there forever. I was chatting him up and he gave me some really beautiful blue corn seed. And so that's what we're growing here. Then in the back of the hoop, we're doing my tree beds. We source almost all of our trees from Forest Ag nurseries. And so I'm growing out trees for Forest Ag. Right now back there, we have a crop of honey locust trees, a bed of Nanking cherry trees, chestnuts, and I think that's all I'm doing for them this year. But kind of nice and protected environment with these raised beds. This bed here is all seedling hybrid chestnut. So it's an American Chinese hybrid. All the seed came from New Forest Farm, Mark Shepard's farm in Wisconsin, and we're growing this out for them to plant out on installs for 2024. You know, people say you can't grow chestnuts in Colorado. The soil's too alkaline and it's too dry here. And what I've found out is that it's really good when you hear a phrase like that gets repeated often, to take it as a sign that there's some learning to do there. What I learned from that is instead of just regurgitating information, I took on a new approach, which was I'm gonna try killing 1,000 chestnuts a year, planting them out on my system, and just see if any of them make it. You know, not with the approach that these need to survive, more with the approach, if any of these survive, it's a win. What it's led us to is the fact that there are genetic variations of these hybrid chestnuts that will grow here. We have them leafing out in pastures, we have them leafing out on our system, we have them leafing out around the garden, and they're growing. I even found some mature chestnuts in the North Fork Valley here, like mature trees that somebody planted probably 30, 40 years ago. What it comes down to is that you can grow chestnuts in Colorado, you just have to plant a lot of them. It's not that chestnuts won't grow in Colorado, it's that most chestnuts aren't going to like it here. Occasionally there's going to be a phenotype or a genetic variation of the chestnut tree that is tolerant of alkaline soil. And when you find those specimens, let them grow out, let them pollinate each other and reproduce, collect seed off of those specimens, grow out those ones, and then after 10, 20 years of doing this religiously, we're going to have actually a very well-adapted Colorado chestnut. I remember one question someone asked in that last video. I just wanted to address that one question. A lot of people said you should get goats. So I wanted to just address that question and just say no.
I'm guessing you don't like goats?
I don't like goats.
You don't like the meat?
You know, it's not that I don't like the meat. It's that, look how easy these animals are. You know this wire right here? It's not even on. And using that, I can convey these cattle across the landscape like a precision tool. Goats, you need like incredible fencing. They're like incredibly mischievous. They get out of fences, and the difference is too, when the cows do get out, they don't really do any damage. They kind of cruise around, they're pretty mellow. I usually find them sitting in the shade somewhere. Goats get out, all these trees are dead. And so my answer is just no.
Love it.
Nope, I like these cows. They do really good for me.
And where can people order your beef and pork?
We sell direct to consumer. If you want to get beef or pork from us, you got to reach out to us directly, either on Instagram, or you got to find someone who knows my phone number.
So Jake, where can we get more information?
Well, if you kind of like what you're seeing here, or you're curious about it, or you have questions about it, my farm is called Cedar Springs Farm. We're on Instagram under that name, and you can kind of follow along with our experiment over here, see how we're doing, and also want to thank you all for even being interested in this interesting line of agriculture. And thanks, Steph, for putting these videos together. You know, the more we can show the world, you know, these alternative practices and what we're up to, the better. It's nice to get the word out there. So thank you, everybody.
Hope you guys enjoyed the tour today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like these types of videos. I have more coming out of local farms here in Colorado, and we'll be branching out later on. Thank you guys.